In this video, I'm going to be demonstrating how to use 2D procedural shaders in Maya. Opening up my Hypershade, I will create a new Lambert material. Notice that my network is quite simple. With my material selected, I open up my attribute editor, and under the color channel, I click on the checkerboard, and I will narrow my selection down to just 2D textures. We are not looking at the file option today. We are looking at the other options, which are procedural shaders. Let's start with the checkerboard. I can apply my new material by middle mouse dragging it onto the objects. Remember to press 6 on your keyboard to see the textures in your viewport. It's very simple to change the colors of our checkerboard. For this demo, I'm going to change my checkerboard back to black and white. Notice that you can select any of your materials in the Hypershade, and then by pressing input and output connections, you can see the shaders network. And here's the network for my checkerboard material. Checker 1 is my 2D procedural shader. Notice that the out color feeds into the color of my material, and we'll also be taking a look at the Place 2D Texture node. By selecting the Place 2D Texture node, we can go to the Attribute Editor. We can rotate frame. We can also rotate the UVs. Currently, the texture is set to repeat 4 times by 4 times. I'm setting it to 1 by 1. And now setting it to repeat 24 times by 24 times on the U and the V axis. In addition, we can also go to the UV editor and adjust the UVs manually. I can select the whole UV shell and rotate. I can translate my UVs. And I can scale them. I can also adjust individual UVs or use tools such as Soft Select to manipulate a larger area. I'm going to open up another file to show you some more things that we can do with 2D procedural shaders. For this example, I'm going to take this teddy bear mesh and I'm going to duplicate it 4 times. I'm also going to create 4 blend shaders. I will assign each shader a different color, and then I will apply the different materials to the 4 different meshes. For my first example, I'm going to start with the red material. I'll select the material, and I will go to the color channel, click on the checkerboard, and I will assign it a 2D texture. In this case, I'm going to start with simple noise. As always, remember to press 6 on your keyboard to actually see the textures. Notice that I can adjust the various attributes of my 2D texture to create different effects. I suggest playing around with these different parameters and seeing what they do. Through experimentation and play, you will learn a lot about 2D procedural shaders. That is how you apply a 2D procedural texture to the color channel of your shader. Moving on to my yellow material, I'm going to do something very interesting here. With my yellow material selected, we can take a look at the network. Very simple right now. I'm going to switch over to my texture tab and find my simple noise texture. And I'm going to middle mouse drag it into the transparency channel of my yellow material. I am using the very same texture for two different materials. For the one, I'm using it as a color channel, and for the other, I'm using it as a transparency channel. Now let's move on to the green material. Once again, I'll go to my hypershade, select my material, go to the texture tab, and I'm going to drag that same simple noise texture, but this time to the bump channel of my material. By adjusting the bump depth property, I can tone down my bump map. One 2D procedural texture being used for three different properties on three different materials: color, transparency, and bump. Moving on to my last material, I will open up the hypershade, select the material, and then go to textures, and I will bring the same texture over, this time to the eccentricity value of my blin. This will adjust the specularity, or the shine, on my material. This is a very effective way of learning how to use 2D procedural textures. Create a texture and apply it to different properties of your materials to see what kind of effect you will get. Here we have one texture applied as a color channel, a transparency channel, bump, and eccentricity. I'm going to delete 3 of my meshes and focus on just this one now. I will also get rid of the materials I'm no longer using. By right-clicking on the color channel of my material, I can break the connection to the texture, and I'm going to create a new one. Once again, I'll go to 2D textures, and this time I'm going to use a ramp, which is one of my favorite procedural shaders. I will also create a 2D plane, which I can apply my material to so that you can see what the texture looks like. Here I'm simply applying the material to the plane by middle mouse dragging it. Okay, let's take a look at the ramp shader. I can easily adjust the placement of the colors on my ramp, as well as add new colors. I'm going to switch it back to a black and white ramp. You can also change the type of ramp. In this case, a circular ramp. And you can change the way that the colors blend. Here I've changed it to none so that there is no gradual blending between the two colors. Experimenting with the different properties of the ramp shader can result in some very interesting effects. Here's my shader network. Notice that the ramp is feeding into the color channel right now. What I'm going to do is middle mouse drag my ramp into the transparency channel. And then I'm going to break the color channel connection so that you can see my ramp being used as a transparency channel. Breaking the connection to the transparency channel, I am now going to try the ramp on the eccentricity property of my material. Once again, I will select my material and then middle mouse drag the ramp into the eccentricity property of my material. And if I make some minor adjustments to my ramp, I can get a better effect. And here you can see it applied as specularity. And while we're at it, I'll try my ramp as a bump map by selecting the texture and middle mouse dragging it into the bump channel, the bump mapping channel of my material. There it is, being used as both specularity and bump in this case. The easiest way to apply textures to the different properties of your materials is as I've demonstrated, by middle mouse dragging it into that channel of your material. The Hypershade also offers a more visual approach to working with your materials, where you can really visualize its network. Here I am duplicating my ramp shader network, and I'm dragging a connection between its out color and the color channel of my material. Now that I have a duplicate of this ramp, I'm going to adjust its colors. Now I'd like to show you a couple examples where I've put these techniques into practice. Here I have an eyeball and a tree trunk. I created both, well, actually all three textures using the techniques that I have demonstrated today. The eyeball texture was created very simply by using a circular ramp feeding into the color channel of the material. And the tree trunk uses a noise texture, which is feeding into both the color channel and the bump map. In addition, I created an extra material for the top to give the tree rings, which was created using another circular ramp. Have fun experimenting and exploring 2D procedural textures. I'm planning a future video where I will demonstrate 3D procedural textures. And as a quick reminder, don't forget to do renders of your models. You cannot always trust what you see in your working viewports. You really need to actually render them out to see how they're actually going to look, to see how your materials are actually looking. Thanks again for watching, and stay tuned for future videos.